Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and hello everyone, it's Group 1 speaking. Before we begin, let's take a look at who are the members of our group. The Group 1 members consist of Aisha, Afifa, Naziha, and Ifa from Year 2 Speech. And today, we will be talking about the relations between prayer and blood. But bear in mind that our explanation will be more focusing on the blood that can invalidate our prayer. Salah or prayer is the foundation and pillar of Islam. Therefore, it is inexcusable to omit Salah. It is through prayer that we fulfill our duty as Allah's creations. When we perform Salah, we must be in a state of purity, of which our body, our clothes, and the praying area should be clean and free from any excrement or najis. Najis refers to ritually unclean. When a Muslim makes contact with one, it may lead to the invalidity of their prayer. Therefore, it is a must for us Muslims to be aware and knowledgeable about the different types of najis to ensure that our salah will be accepted. And among the different types of najis is blood. The regulation of blood as najis can be seen in Surah Al-An'am verse 145. Tell them, O Muhammad, I do not find in what has been revealed to me anything forbidden for anyone who wants to eat unless it is carrion, outpoured blood, and the flesh of swine, all of which is unclean. Well, you might be asking, if I know that I'll be performing prayer, why would I let myself get stained with blood? Actually, there are a lot of situations where it is common for you to be exposed to blood, whether intentionally or unintentionally, before or during prayer. You may get exposed to blood from being involved in an accident, after an injection, or even from a mosquito's blood. Let's say, when you pray, a mosquito lands on your hand, you smack it, and before you know it, its blood has smeared on your hand. For women, you might also suffer from istihadah. Also, you may have a major wound and the blood just won't stop flowing during prayer, especially when someone has hemophilia, which is a rare disorder that makes you bleed for a longer time after an injury. You might also end up discovering a blood-stained cloth or tissue inside your pocket just right after you pray. Another situation is that you may also get a nosebleed or suddenly taste blood inside your mouth. Then, when any of these situations happen to you, you'll ask yourself, oh no, what should I do? Should I repeat my prayer? Will my prayer be accepted by Allah? Even with this blood, can I still pray?
What kinds of blood would be considered unforgiven and would invalidate one's prayers? The Hanafi school of jurisprudence stated that the size of the dirham from a major impurity is forgiven and it is not obligatory to wash it. The prayer with the existence of such impurity is sufficient, which means valid. Kanzul Daqa'iq, the Hanafi book, reads, the size of a dirham is pardoned like the width of the palm from a pure impurity, such as blood, wine, chicken feces, urine of animals that we are not allowed to eat, and dung. And what is less than a quarter of a garment from a minor impurity, such as the urine of animals that we are allowed to eat, the urine of a horse, and feces of a bird that we are not allowed to eat. Whereas, the amount of a little or a lot in the Al-Shafi'i school is determined by uruf, which means customary custom. A small amount of what is discussed is what is difficult to avoid from it, in contrast to a large amount which means can be avoided, so it is determined by uruf, habitual custom. It is key to know that the general rule is that if the size of the blood present on the body or clothing is equal to or less than the size of a dirham, which is around 24 mm, it is permissible for the person to pray with that blood. However, this doesn't apply to blood such as menstruation blood, blood from a pig or other unlawful meat, blood from a corpse, or blood of lochia, which means the normal discharge from the uterus after childbirth. These types of blood invalidate the prayer no matter how little in amount they may be on the person's body or clothing. According to scholars, the blood of living beings, including humans, is impure. Among proofs of the impurity of blood is the hadith narrated by Al-Bukhari and Muslim. A woman came to the Prophet and said, "Menstrual blood may get onto the clothes of any one of us. What should she do with it?" And the Prophet said, "She should scratch it, then rub it with water, then wash it, then pray in it." So, the Prophet commanded her to purify the garment of menstrual blood before praying in it. If a person realized right after prayer that there is an unforgivable blood on his or her clothes, hence the performed prayer is invalid and should be performed again. This is due to the requirement to ensure the purity of our garments before praying. Imam Al-Ramli said that if he knows that there are najis on his clothes, then he forgets, then it is obligatory for him to perform prayer again because he has neglected to purify himself. In summary, the unforgiven blood that would invalidate one's prayer is the blood from a human, an animal, or an insect that is larger than the size of a dirham. However, menstruation blood, blood from a pig or other unlawful meat, blood from a corpse, or blood of lokia would invalidate one's prayer, regardless of how little the amount is. This means that even if the amount or size of the blood is less than that size of a dirham, it is still considered unforgiven blood. A Muslim's prayer will not be accepted if there is presence of unforgiven blood on his body, his clothes, or the praying area.
However, there are exceptions of which the presence of blood would not invalidate the prayers. This is known as forgiven blood. One of the examples of forgiven blood is blood from a wound. If the blood that has stained the body or clothing comes from a wound, sore, or a boil of the person due to an injury or an accident, and the wound is not healed, it is permissible for the person to pray with that blood normally until the wound has healed. Blood that emits from a wound that has not healed is permissible to pray in no matter the quantity, even if it means the blood is larger than the size of a dirham. However, before praying, the person should ensure that the bleeding area is binded with a clean cloth, such as a bandage, so that the blood does not spread to other areas. But if the wound is already healed and it is safe for the person to cleanse the area, then the person should wash off the blood before performing the prayer. Otherwise, his prayer would be invalid. Another example of forgiven blood is blood from a bleeding nose or mouth. If a part of the person's body or clothing has been in contact with blood due to a bleeding nose or mouth, performing prayers in that state will be valid. Let's say that while praying, you suddenly notice that your nose or your gums are bleeding. In that scenario, you can still continue your prayer and that your prayer will still be valid, but this is as long as the blood that is emitting is not in an abundant amount and that it doesn't interfere with your prayer. However, the person whose gums are bleeding must spit into a tissue or into his garment rather than swallowing the blood, as that would invalidate the prayer. But if the person involuntarily swallowed the blood because the blood has already reached the throat, their prayer would be considered as valid because the person did not deliberately swallow the blood. It's very important to remember that if the person experiences a bleeding nose or mouth before prayer, he should rinse it off with water and then perform wudu first. And if the amount of blood during prayer is so excessive that it interferes with the prayer, then they should stop their prayer. Another example of forgiven blood is blood from a mosquito. If someone kills a mosquito or lice and its blood smears on its clothing or fingers, it is only considered najis if it is a lot of blood. But if the amount is very small or insignificant, which is less than the size of a dirham, then that blood is considered forgiven blood and the person's prayers are valid. Other examples of forgiven blood would be the blood that comes from other similar animals such as blood from a fly, lice, and other blood that is unobservable with the naked eyes. Imam Khatib Sharbini said, among the examples of forgiven blood is from animals considered as al-balwa, which is difficult to clean, such as the blood of mosquito, fly, lice, and other blood that is unobservable with the naked eyes. An important information that we should take into consideration is whether or not there is lining on the clothing. If blood spills on clothing that does not have a lining and it reaches the other side, it is considered to be one blood, and the side on which the blood has spread more must be taken into account when determining its size in relation to a dirham. So in other words, in the case that the clothing has no lining and the blood has seeped to the other side, then the side with the bigger blood stain should be taken into account instead of the side with the smaller blood stain. However, if the clothing has a lining and that both sides become bloody separately, then each side must be considered separately. Therefore, if the combined area of blood on the front and back of the clothing is less than a dirham, prayers with it are valid. But if it is equal to or more than the size of a dirham, then prayers performed with it are invalid. So in this case, the combined area should be taken into account when determining its size in relation to a dirham.
If the area of blood on one's body or clothing is less than the size of a dirham and some moisture reaches it and spread it further, prayers performed with it are invalid even if the combined area of the blood and the moisture is not equal to the size of a dirham. However, if moisture only reaches the blood without spreading it, there is no problem in performing prayers with it. If a person's body part or clothing is moist and damp and it comes into contact with blood that has not come from their own body, he cannot perform prayers in it, even if the moist area that has been made impure by the blood is less than the size of a dirham. If there is a situation in which you find out after performing a prayer that there is a blood-stained tissue or material in your pocket, then the prayer does not have to be repeated as long as the size of the blood is less than the size of a dirham and the blood did not transfer on his clothes. If the area of blood on one's body or clothing is less than the size of a dirham, but he does not know that it is a type of blood that it is not excusable in prayers and perform prayers, and afterwards he realized that it was a type of blood that is not excusable in prayers, it is not necessary for him to perform the prayer again. Similarly, if he believed that the amount of blood is less than the size of a dirham and performed prayers, and afterwards he realized that it was equal to or more than the size of a dirham, it is not necessary for him to perform the prayer again. In terms of performing prayer, when a woman is in istihadah, a hadith narrated by Sunan Abu Dawud, Hamna said, "My menstruation was great in quantity and severe, so I came to the Messenger of Allah for a decision and told him. I found him in the house of my sister Zainab, daughter of Jahsh. I said, Messenger of Allah, I am a woman who menstruates in great quantities and it is severe, so what do you think about it? It has prevented me from praying and fasting." He said, "I suggest that you should use cotton, for it absorbs the blood." She replied, "It is too copious for that." He said, "Then take a cloth." Based on this hadith, it is clear that in performing prayer, women that are experiencing istihadah should use cotton or clothes to absorb the blood and prevent them from being flowed or spread to other places. As a Muslim, we must ensure that we are clean and free from any impurity before performing the prayer. It is also important in preventing ourselves from feeling doubtful when praying. At the same time, it is also important in achieving the khushu' in our prayer.